Senators of the Republic.
The 14th session of the Senate and the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. We'll be led in prayer today by a distinguished colleague from the city of San Juan, no other than Senator Jinggoy Estrada.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Heavenly Father, we humbly come before you, seeking your guidance, wisdom, and strength. Grant us clarity of mind and purpose as we deliberate on matters that impact our nation and its people. Help us to set aside personal interests and biases, enabling us to focus solely on the welfare and progress of our beloved country. Lord, may your presence be felt in this chamber, uniting us in a spirit of cooperation and understanding. Guide our discussions, decisions, and actions so they may reflect your justice, compassion, and righteousness. Strengthen our resolve to serve with integrity and humility, always mindful of the trust bestowed upon us by the Filipino people. In your infinite mercy, grant us the courage to pursue what is right, the grace to accept our limitations, and the humility to seek your will above all else. May this session be filled with your peace, and may the outcomes be aligned with your divine purpose for our nation. Sa gitna ng mga alinlangan at tensyon sa politika, gabayan po ninyo kami upang magampanan namin ang lahat ng aming tungkulin bilang mga mambabatas. Pinagdarasal namin ang bawat takbang na aming tatahakin ay maging tama, makatarungan at naglalayong mapanatili ang integridad ng ating demokrasya. Ipagkaloob po ang inyong karunungan sa aming mga lider upang makamtan namin ang tunay na kapayapaan at kaunlaran na nagmumula lamang sa iyong kalooban. Imulat po ninyo ang aming mata sa inyong pagmamahal at tanglawan mo ang buong sambayanan ng ilaw ng katotohanan. Tinataas namin ang lahat ng ito sa inyo, aming Panginoon. Amen.
Amen. Session suspended for 1 minute. Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator Dela Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Hontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 20 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, before we proceed, may I just acknowledge some guests from the gallery, guests of this representation and guests of the Senate. Our good friend, the son of the late Edward Hagedorn of Palawan is here, Mr. Clink Hagedorn. We welcome his presence in this august chamber. Also, Mr. President, guests of this representation, local officials from Siniloan, Laguna, led by Vice Mayor Carla Valderrama, Mayor Lota Manalo and Vice Mayor Gaudioso Manalo of Lobo, Batangas, Mayor Jester Ed Kimbo of Labasan, Zamboanga del Norte, Mayor Jomafer Alvarez and Vice Mayor Lubic Jacob of Luisiana, Laguna, guest of Senator Lapid and its officials. Guest of Senator Cayetano, Barangay Councilors League of the Philippines, Cebu Chapter. Guest of Senator Legarda, delegation from the DOJ Refugee and Stateless Persons Protection Unit, led by Chief State Counsel Dennis Arvin Chan. Guest of Senator Gatchalian, Vice Governor Nathaniel Midtimbang of Maguindanao del Sur. Mayor Mary Joy Midtimbang of Datu Angal, Maguindanao del Sur. Mayor Baybong Midtimbang Ampatuan of Datu Hofer. Councilor Jai Esplana of Valenzuela City. And our 30 Sangguniang Kabataan chairpersons of Valenzuela City. We welcome all of them. Guest of Senator Ejercito, Mayor Rafael Tanhua, Mayor Jose Orlino of Tanday City, Negros Oriental. We welcome all of them in this August chamber.
Yes, welcome to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen. Mabuhay po kayong lahat. Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 47th Session, Tuesday, February 6, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There being no objection, Secretary, please proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2530, modernizing the Philippine Coast Guard, creating for the purpose the Philippine Coast Guard Modernization Trust Fund, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Dela Rosa.
To the Committees of Public Services, National Defense, and Finance.
2531, establishing a Level 3 General Hospital in Bay, Laguna, to be known as the Laguna Regional Hospital under the direct control and supervision of the DOH, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ejercito.
To the Committee on Rules.
2532, granting Philippine citizenship to Luis Fabregas Co., Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Rules.
2533, declaring a parcel of land in Naira, Palawan, a protected area with a category of wildlife sanctuary, to be referred to as the Rasa Island Wildlife Sanctuary, providing for its management and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Environment, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Resolutions, proposed Senate Resolution 925, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry to discuss and assess the implementation of RA 8545 for the purpose of crafting complementary or amendatory legislation, Senator Gatchalian.
To the Committee on Basic Education, Finance.
926, resolution congratulating and commending the winners of the 2023 Galing Pook Awards introduced by Senator Poe.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee Report 190 by the Committee on Labor, Employment and Human Resources Development on Senate number 2534 with Senator Zubiri, Revilla Jr., Legarda, Binay, Go, and Estrada as authors. An act providing for a 100 pesos daily minimum wage increase for employees and workers in the private sector. Recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 2002 and 2018, sponsor Senator Estrada.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Let's continue with the additional.
Additional reference of business, messages from the House. Letter from the House informing the Senate that on 12 December 2023, it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House number 9656, renaming the Mindanao Central Sanitarium in Paso Bolong, Zamboanga City to Zamboanga Regional Medical Center. And House number 9556, amending Section 1 of RA 11272 and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committee on Health and Demography.
House number 9623, establishing in Bay, Laguna, a Level 3 General Hospital to be known as the Laguna Regional Hospital, appropriating funds therefore. And House number 9624, establishing in the city of San Jose, Nueva Ecija, a General Hospital to be known as the San Jose City Mother and Child General Hospital, appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committee on Health and Demography and Finance.
House number 6556, District Office of the LTO in San Dionisio, Iloilo, appropriating funds therefore. 9625, converting the Extension Office of the LTO in Tuao, Cagayan, into a regular district office, transferring its location in Solana, Cagayan. 9626, upgrading the District LTO Office in Candon, Ilocos Sur into a Class B district office. 9627, upgrading the district office of the LTO in Lingayen, Pangasinan into a Class B district office and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees of Public Services and Finance.
House number 986, providing for the construction of a tri-level interchange along MC Briones Street, corner UN Avenue, Mandaue City, Province of Cebu, and appropriating funds therefore. And House number 9589, providing for the construction of a national highway in Baloy, Lanao del Norte, and appropriating funds therefore. And 9590, providing for the construction of a national highway from the junction of Linamon-Zamboanga Road and the junction of Linamon-Zamboanga National Road at Barangay Lapinig, Municipality of Kapatagan in Lanao del Norte, to be known as the Kapatagan Valley Coastal Road and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees of Public Works and Finance.
9592, separating the Lapuyan National High School, Carpoc Extension in Carpoc, Lapuyan, Zamboanga del Sur, converting it into Independent National High School to be known as the Carpoc National High School, appropriating funds therefore. 9593, separating the Lapuyan National High School, Pampang Extension, Pampang, Lapuyan, Zamboanga del Sur, converting it into an Independent National High School to be known as the Pampang National High School, appropriating funds therefore. 9594, separating the Paulino Derry National High School, Liguac Extension in Barangay Liguac, Pitogo, Zamboanga del Sur, from the Paulino Derry National High School, converting it into Independent National High School to be known as a Liguac National High School, appropriating funds therefore. 9601, creating a high school for sports in Bagak, Bataan, to be known as the Bataan School for Sports and appropriating funds therefore. And House number 9602, establishing the Baybay City National High School for Sports in Baybay, Leyte, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees of Basic Education and Finance.
House number 9635, establishing regular campuses of Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology in Aliaga and Coyapo, Nueva Ecija, appropriating funds therefore. And House number 9636, establishing a TESDA district office for the first legislative district of South Cotabato in Polomolok, South Cotabato, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Finance.
Letter from the House informing the Senate that on 13 December 2023, it designated Representatives Enverga, Swansing Jr., Nograles, Estrella, Emano, Plaza, Singson, Mihan, Kimbo, Ferrer, Lee, and Tan as conferees of the Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House number 9284, House number 3917, and Senate number 2432.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader. Majority Leader, I believe that the Vice Governor also of Oriental Mindoro is here, Vice Governor E.J. Falcon. Did we recognize him earlier?
Yes, Mr. President, I have yet to receive the information that the Vice Governor
No, he
of
just messaged-
Oriental Mindoro is
He
here.
messaged me lang.
But
Oh, he messaged me.
we would like to welcome him as well, Mr. President. Also, Mr. President, San Juan Knights, guests of Senator Jinggoy Estrada are also here. We'd like to recognize them, Mr. President.
Welcome to the Senate,
Yeah.
Your Honors.
Mr. President, before we move to some privileged speeches, Mr.
We'd like to
President.
also recognize our former Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yes, Mr.
Justice
President.
Francis Hardelesa, together with our legal team of the Senate with us, Attorney Chito.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. President. Mr. President, just before we recognize the chairperson of Committee on Labor, Mr. President, I would just like to put on record, Mr. President, and report to the body, kasama na po ang mga empleyado ng service contractors sa distribution ng service charge sa revised IRR ng RA 11360. Ito po ay inilabas ng DOLE ngayong February 2, pinaglaban po ng Senado, ng inyong Senado. Ang batas na ito, binabalangkas pa lamang ang panukalang ibigay ang 100% service charge sa mga manggagawa noong 17th Congress. Kaya wala pong mapagsidlan ang ating tuwa nang lumabas po ang revised IRR. At sa wakas po ay natupad na ang adhikain nating maisama ang mga regular at non-regular workers sa makikibahagi sa service charge. Kasama po natin, Mr. President, kayo mismo bilang dating majority leader na nakipaglaban dito with Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Angara, Senator Win Gatchalian, Senator Ejercito, Senator Grace po, our minority leader, Coco Pimentel, Senator Villar, and Senator Marcos. Mr. President, muli, maraming salamat and indeed, God bless our country at mabuhay ang manggagawang Pilipino.
Mabuhay.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders committee report number 190 on Senate Bill number 2534. This bill pertains to the 100 peso daily minimum wage increase act. I so move, Mr. President.
It is my honor to approve the motion of the majority floor leader for this long-awaited measure. There being no objection, motion is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move that we consider Senate Bill number 2534 under committee report number 190 and ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
There being no objection, motion is approved. Secretary, please read the title of the measure.
An act providing for a 100 peso daily minimum wage increase for employees and workers in the private sector.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, I move that we recognize the distinguished gentleman from San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Ejercito Estrada, Chairperson of the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Our distinguished colleague, the chairman of the Committee on Labor, Senator Jingo Estrada of the City of San Juan, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as your chairperson of the Senate Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, it is my honor to present today to this august chamber Senate Bill number 2534 under Committee Report number 190 entitled An Act Providing for a 100 pesos daily minimum wage increase for employees and workers in the private sector. This proposal is a consolidation of Senate Bill number 2002 filed by Senate President Mig Subiri with Senators Legarda, Binay, and Go as co-authors, and Senate Bill number 2018 by Senator Ramon Bong Revilla Jr. Consistent with the constitutional precepts to alleviate the living conditions of ordinary Filipinos through policies that provide for a rising standard of living and improved quality of life, particularly of the working class, by guaranteeing their right to a decent pay. It is the aim of this committee and the collective conscience of this Senate to update the minimum wage by 100 pesos for workers in the private sector. Under this measure, all employees in the private sector in the entire country, whether agricultural or non-agricultural, are entitled to 100 peso minimum wage increase. This would guarantee an increased daily pay for around 4.2 million minimum wage earners. Let me just give some retrospect. The last legislated wage hike that was implemented in the country dates back to 1989 with the enactment of Republic Act number 6727, or the Wage Rationalization Act, which effectively declared that wages would be set on a regional basis by the regional wage boards. To answer workers' clamor, Mr. President, almost all regional wage boards have issued wage orders last year to increase the minimum daily wage rates in their respective regions, ranging from 30 pesos to 89 pesos. And we are not stopping there. The Senate's effort to legislate an increase in minimum wages augments the wage increases already issued by the regional wage boards. Thus, after consideration of the existing socioeconomic conditions and positions of various sectors, it is incumbent upon us to propose a daily pay hike to help alleviate the burden of Filipinos in the face of soaring prices of basic commodities and rising cost of living. We cannot turn a blind eye on the injustice to and the economic conditions of our workers, who are considered the lifeblood of our economy. Ginoong Pangulo, tapatin po natin ang kasulukuyang minimum wage sa iba't ibang rehiyon na nasa 306 pesos hanggang 610 pesos ay hindi sapat upang bumuhay ng kahit isang maliit na pamilya sa araw-araw. Computin po natin, Ginoong Pangulo. Halimbawa, 7,344 pesos ang buwanang sahod na matatanggap ng manggagawa sa isang retail establishment na tumatanggap ng 306 pesos per day. ikaltas mo pang SSS, Pag-ibig at PhilHealth, may tuturing na siyang mahirap sapagkat ang national poverty threshold ay 9,686 lamang. Samantala, ang pinakamataas na sahod na 610 pesos mula sa Kalakhang, Maynila o dito sa Metro Manila ay makakatanggap naman ng 14,640 pesos kada buwan. Mas mataas lamang ng kaunti sa near poor threshold na 12,400. While minimum wage in Metro Manila for the non-agricultural sector consistently recorded the highest basic pay in the country at 610 pesos per day, however, the actual daily pay is eroded by inflation. The real value of the minimum wage, which reflects the inflation-adjusted rates using the Consumer Price Index, has fallen to 514 pesos and 50 centavos in the capital as of July 2023, and further decreased to 504 pesos for October of 2024. And this scenario is replicated across all regions. Talagang nakakaawa ang ating mga manggagawa. Hindi pa rin talaga abot sa pangangailangan para mabuhay at matugunan ang pangangailangan ng mga manggagawa na may 5 miyembro ng pamilya. Sa kasulukuyang antas ng minimum wage, kulang ang budget para i-treat man lamang sa Jollibee o ibang restaurant ng kanilang pamilya, maski isang beses dahil ubos na sa pangunahing pangangailangan pa lamang. Bagamat ang inflation ay bumabagal, nasa 2.8% nitong January 2024, hindi ibig sabihin ito ay bumababa na rin ang presyo ng mga bilihin. Sa katunayan, ang rise inflation ay pumalo sa 22.6%, ang pinakamataas na antas mula March of 2009, at patuloy pa ang pagtaas ng ibang mga bilihin sa kabila ng patuloy na pagtaas ng presyo ng kuryente at gasolina. While we have seen inflation at a downward trend, economists expect that inflation headache from rising food prices will likely persist until 2025. The status quo simply cannot achieve this. But with this legislative push, this means that a typical family of 5 needs to work 2 full-time minimum wage jobs to earn a living wage. The current minimum wage is even further away from meeting the basic needs of workers' families. It was estimated that a family of 5 needs at least 8,379 pesos per month to meet just their basic food requirements. That translates to about 280 pesos for food expenses alone in 2021. But in reality, Mr. President, this amount seems not enough considering the current prices of basic commodities. Ginoong Pangulo, sa bigas pa lamang, lagpas 50 pesos na ang 1 kilo. Higit pa hindi pa magandang klase yan. Dagdagan mo pa ng lulutuing karne o gulay o pambili ng lutong ulam sa karinderya. Mr. President, even with this wage hike bill, the difference between the minimum wage and the cost of living or the family living wage is glaring. But this is the most that we can propose, balancing the welfare of workers and businesses. Bagamat kinikilala natin ang wage hikes na ipinatupad kamakailan ng regional wage boards, tila nabura na ito ng patuloy na pagtaas ng presyo ng pangunahing bilihin. Kaya naman natin minumungkahi ito. Ang pagtaas ng sahod ng mga manggagawa sa mas dissenting level ay napapanahon at talagang kailangan para ipantay kahit papano sa pagtaas ng presyo ng ating mga bilihin. Pinakinggan po natin ang hinaing ng ating mga manggagawa sa matagal ng humihiling ng aumento. At ito na ang tugon ng inyong Senado sa mga panawagang yon. This statutory increase, if passed into law, would also result in increased purchasing power and would stimulate economic activity, thereby contributing to national growth. This wage hike bill would also help attain our goal of reducing poverty incidence rates in the coming years to have a prosperous, predominantly middle-class society where no one is poor by 2040. Under the Philippine Development Plan, the government is targeting to reduce the poverty incidence rate to 13.2% by 2025 and to 9% by 2028. Mr. President, recognizing the struggles of low-income households that are bearing the brunt of high prices, this initiative demonstrates the Senate's belief that our workers who are creating value for the companies deserve a dignified wage and ultimately respect. Bilang pinuno ng Senate Committee on Labor, naniniwala po tayo na para sa ordinaryong manggagawa, makakatulong ang taas sahod na ito para pambili ng bigas at ulam, pamasahe at pandagdag maski sa maliit na halaga sa pang-araw-araw na gastusin. We also hope that after this legislative initiative, our regional wage boards would work expeditiously and be more sympathetic, proactive, and responsive to the needs and plight of our workers. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, we thank the good gentleman from San Juan for sponsoring this very important piece of legislation. We have been waiting and excited to deliberate this particular measure, especially the Senate President of the Republic of the Philippines. And so I move that he be recognized to co-sponsor the measure. I so move, Mr. President.
Our Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri is recognized to deliver his sponsorship speech.
Maraming salamat to our Majority Floor Leader, to our Senate President, the Deputy Majority Floor Leader, Presiding Officer, to all my colleagues, lalong-lalo na sa aking mahal na kapatid ni Senator Jingo Estrada, na alam ko napakalaki ng pressure sa kanya ng mga manggagawa, hindi sa manggagawa, pero sa mga may-ari ng mga kumpanya na hindi po to i-take up. But Mr. President, today is a historic day. It is my honor to co-sponsor our bill legislating a 100 peso wage increase for all minimum wage earners in the private sector. Ever since we filed our bill for a 150 peso across-the-board wage increase, araw-araw na pong tanong sa akin ng mga ating mga kababayan, Senator Migs, kailan ba ninyo ipapasa ang pagtaas ng aming sahod? Halos kung saan po ako pumunta. Kasi naalala nila po, last year, halos araw-araw po tayo na sa news kasama ng mga senador na ang pangako natin, itataas po natin ang kanilang sahod. Lalo lang pong lumakas ang pananawagan nito at uminit ang usapin nung uminit po ang usapin ng People's Initiative at Charter Change. Marami nang nagtatanong din sa akin, bakit hindi lang unahin ang pagtaas ng sahod? Dito mismo sa Senado, nagkaroon na po ng rally sa labas, ang sigaw, no to Chacha, yes to wage increase. Nung isang araw lang po yan. Gusto ko lang pong sabihin sa kanila, naririnig po natin ang sigaw ng bayan. Naririnig po kayo ng Senado. Ang good news po, habang dumadaan ang ating minimum wage increase bill sa committee ni Senator Jingo Estrada at mga TWG dito sa Senado, unti-unti na rin nakadama ng ginhawa ang ating mga manggagawa dahil sa pagtaas ng minimum wages sa ating mga rehiyon. Mula nung itunulak natin ng 150 peso wage increase nung huling Marso, sunod-sunod ng kumilos ang ating regional wage boards at nagdeklara ng kani-kanilang pagtaas ng minimum wage. But I put credit to the Senate because if we did not make that noise, kung hindi po tayo nag-ingay, kung hindi po tayo nagsalita, ay baka hindi pa gumalaw ang mga regional wage boards. Una na dyan, ang pagtaas ng wages sa NCR. Tinas po ng 40 pesos noong July. Mula 35 hanggang 50 pesos naman ang dagdag sa minimum wage sa Calabarzon at depende sa sektor, 30 to 35 naman po pesos ang dinagdag sa Ilocos Region, 30 pesos sa Cagayan Valley, 40 pesos sa Central Luzon, 30 pesos sa Western Visayas, 33 pesos sa Central Visayas, 30 pesos hanggang 40 pesos sa Zamboanga Peninsula at 35 sa Soc-Sargen. Effective na rin ang Eastern Visayas na 30 peso minimum wage increase at nung December may dagdag na po ng 30 pesos ang mga manggagawa sa Cordillera Region at Bicol Region at 40 pesos naman sa Mimaropa. At sa ating mga kapatid sa Mindanao, mayroon din po tayong 35 peso increase sa Caraga and 33 pesos na increase sa Northern Mindanao. So nagpapasalamat po kami sa Regional Wage Boards at sa National Wages Productivity Commission for acting on the call of our people for better wages across the country. Pero mga kababayan ko, alam naman po natin, hindi sapat ang dagdag na 30 to 40 pesos lang ng ating minimum wage earners. Hindi pa nga ito sapat sa pagbili ng 1 kilong bigas na ngayon ay umabot na ng 60 pesos. So biro mo, yung dagdag, hindi naman pwede makabili ng 1 kilong bigas, ay kawawa naman po ang ating mga kababayan. Makakatulong itong pag-akyat ng regional wage boards, pero mas malaki pa rin ang pangangailangan ng ating mga kababayan. Hindi po tama na presyo lang ng bilihin ang tumataas. Kailangan sahod rin. Hindi tama na ang kumpanya lang ang kumikita. Kailangan ang manggagawa din po ay kumita. Ang sabi nga ng isang kaibigan ko, share lang. Di ba? Anong ibig ko sabihin? Nung train law, ibinaba po natin ang corporate income tax from 32% to 25%. Ang laki po ng pagbaba nitong corporate income tax ng mga korporasyon. Hindi rin po tayong pumayag nung gusto nilang itaas ang dividends tax para mas malaki din po ang kita ng mga may-ari nito mga kumpanyang ito. Ngayon po, sisingilin naman natin ang mga may-ari ng kumpanyang ito. Dahil binaba po natin ang inyong corporate income tax, hindi na lang tayo pumayag sa pagtaas ng dividends tax, bakit lang kayo lamang ang dayaman sa ginawa po natin mga hakbang? Kailangan, dapat tulungan din natin ang kapakanan ng ating manggagawa. Kaya patuloy po natin itinutulak itong legislated wage increase. Pero dahil po sa pag-aksyon ng mga regional wage boards, mag-a-adjust na rin tayo konti sa imbis na 150 pesos across the board increase na itinulak natin nung una sa Senado, gagawin na lang po natin itong 100 muna. Halos pareho naman po ito sa itataas ng sweldo if we add this 100 pesos minimum wage, mandated minimum wage in our regions, and we add the increases done by the wage boards. Ang lumalabas po, 130 to 150 pesos pa rin ang increase para sa ating mga kababayan. Ito na po ang ating kompromiso. Ang middle ground ika nga na makakatulong sa ating mga manggagawa, nakakayanin pa rin ibigay ng ating mga negosyante. Lalo na sa mga micro, small, at medium enterprises. Dahil ayaw naman natin silang maperwisyo at baka magsira ang mga negosyong na to. Kung itulak pa rin kasi natin ang 150 peso wage increase on top of the regional wage increases, ay aalma na talaga ang business sector. At baka mawala ng pag-asang may pasa itong panukala dito sa ating Kongreso. Pero umaapila rin tayo sa ating mga negosyante na gawin nating mas competitive ang pagsahod natin dito sa ASEAN. Marami kasi nagsasabi sa akin noon, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President rather, ang sabi po nila, bakit ako na ganun? Mr. President, ang sabi po nila sa atin ay, we are one of the highest wages. 10 years po ago, sabi nila, we are one of the highest wages in the region. A quick check of the facts, Mr. President, lahat po sila ay nag-adjust na. Tayo na lang ang naiwan. So now, if you look at the region, tayo isa sa mga pinakamababa in terms of wages sa ating mga kababayan. And look at our regions, our neighbors in our region. Minimum wage in Jakarta, Indonesia is already 727 pesos. That is compared to our NCR rate of only 610 pesos. This is why we are continuing to push for minimum wage increase despite pushback from some sectors. Doon sa ibang bansa, pwede bang ma-expand ng konti yan? Yung Malaysia ay 758 pesos a day ang Malaysia. Jakarta is 724 pesos a day. Yung Singapore is already minimum wage monthly. 30 plus thousand pesos yata, Mr. President, ang sa Singapore. At ang Vietnam, ang balita sa akin ng ambassador sa Vietnam, magkakaroon din sila ng wage increase. Dahil sa dami na pong foreign direct investment na pumasok doon, pati sila, umaalma na ang kanilang mga manggagawa. At habang itinutulak natin ang 100 peso minimum wage increase para sa buong bansa, syempre, patuloy natin kakalampagin ang regional wage boards sa natitira pang mga riyon sa Mindanao na hindi pa nabibigyan ng dagdag sahod. I think there are still 2 or 3 regions in Mindanao na hindi pa sila nabibigyan ng sahod. Ang sahod po nila na yon, for example, in BARM, is only 300 pesos a day. Mr. President, 300 pesos a day. How can you survive with 300 pesos a day? Bakit ang Jollibee ba nila doon ay mas mura sa Jollibee dito sa Manila? Ang gasolina ba nila doon ay mas mura ba sa gasolina dito sa Manila? Ang pamasahe nila sa pagsakay sa jeepney at bus, mas mura ba doon kaysa dito? Hindi po, Mr. President. Pare-pareho lang ang presyo ng pagkain, ng kuryente. Mas mahal pa nga ang kuryente sa Mindanao na umaabot na 14 pesos per kilowatt hour. Dito sa Metro Manila, 9 pesos per kilowatt hour. Tapos yung katumbas na sahod nila, Mr. President, is 300 to 350 pesos a day. Hanggang na yun, hindi pa inaaksyonan ng regional wage boards. Kaya hindi nyo po masisi ang Senado na gumalaw para sa ating mga manggagawa. Now is time that we push for the benefits of our labor sector. With this bill, we hope to take the vital step in recognizing the worth of our workers. Ang mga manggagawa po ang pundasyon ng ating lipunan at karapatan nila na kumita ng disenteng sahod para magkaroon ng disenteng buhay ang ating mga manggagawa. So I enjoin our colleagues to support us in the passage of this bill. Let us make this a statement of the Senate, an action of the Senate for our people. Aksyonan natin ang tunay na panawagan ng bayan. Mabuhay po ang Republika ng Pilipinas, mabuhay po ang ating mga manggagawa. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Our Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm happy and proud of this institution, especially that we heard our Senate President's very passionate co-sponsorship speech, Mr. President. I'd like to just give my short co-sponsorship speech, if I may, Mr. President.
Yes, the Majority Leader is
Thank you,
recognized.
Mr. President. I will just ask, Mr. President, that the whole speech of this representation be inserted into the records, but I just cannot help but acknowledge and thank our Senate President Mig Zubiri, the principal author also of this very important piece of legislation, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, the chairperson of the Committee on Labor, sa kanya pong pagtalakay sa panukalang nagtataas ng sweldo ng ating mga masisipag at magigiting na manggagawa. Alam niyo po, Ginoong Pangulo, lagi kong ine-example yung pinakapayak na produkto na kinakain ng ating mga kababayan sa 4 na sulok ng Pilipinas. Yung po yung noodles, Mr. President. Natempt akong sabihin yung Lucky Me. Yun ho yung pinaka-basic. Pero pare-pareho po yung presyo kahit saan kang lupalop ng Pilipinas, pero hindi pare-pareho ang sweldo. Ang nakakalungkot, kawawa ho talaga yung mga kababayan nating naiiwan, lalo na hindi natin sinasabi na hindi epektibo ang regional wage boards. But kung titingnan po talaga natin, malayong malayo doon sa living wage. Kaya po isang karangalan na maging co-sponsor ng Senate Bill number 2534 sa ilalim po ng Committee Report number 190 na nagbibigay dagdag na 100 pesos daily minimum wage. Alam nyo, Ginoong Pangulo, ayon po sa pinakahuling poverty statistics ng Philippine Statistics Authority, yung monthly poverty threshold po ng isang pamilya na may 5 miyembro ay 13,797 pesos kada buwan. Ito po ay para matustusan ang kanilang mga pangangailangan para po sa pagkain, anumang mag-a-arise na pangangailangan nila at iba pa. Mas mataas po ito ng 14.2% sa naitalang 12,082 pesos monthly poverty threshold sa taong 2021, Ginoong Pangulo. Kaya naman po, yung panukalang dagdagan ng 100 piso ang minimum wage ay maghahatid ng ginhawa kahit papaano. Kahit nga po, hindi pa sapat. Pero kahit papaano, pwede na, makakatulong na rin sa ating mga kababayang Pilipino. Muli, Ginoong Pangulo, isa po itong positibong hakbang upang makamit natin ang pangako ng ating minamahal na konstitusyon na magkaroon ng living wage ang bawat pamilyang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo. At this juncture, I move that we recognize our Senate President Pro Temp to co-sponsor the measure.
Maraming salamat to our Majority Floor Leader ng puso niya ay para sa manggagawa, former Chairperson of the Committee of Labor. Our Senate President Pro Tempore, Senator Legarda is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I commend you for bringing this into immediate attention, and of course, the chairman of the Committee on Labor, Senator Jinggoy Estrada. Thank you to the Majority Leader as well for concurring with the leadership of the Senate. It is my privilege and honor to co-sponsor Senate Bill 2534, an act providing for a 100 pesos daily minimum wage increase for employees and workers in the private sector. It is very clear that inflation has hurt the labor sector, and most families do not find the means to make ends meet. It is high time we increase the minimum wage across the board in the private sector to alleviate the financial strain on our families. By ensuring that families earn a fair wage, we can address concerns about basic necessities, and this will enable families to enjoy more fulfilling and stable lives. And this, I believe, is a matter of economic justice and basic human dignity. While the cost of living continues to rise, our laborers find it difficult to keep up with it, and this leads to individuals not being able to provide food on their table, a basic need, not being able to study, even if basic education is free, even if higher education is free in state institutions, and also not being able to afford health care, even if we already have PhilHealth, or not being able to live in their own homes. And by increasing the minimum wage, there is a chance to hopefully lift individuals out of abject poverty. There is a chance for them to be more productive, to pay more taxes, to spend more in our economy, to be able to live a life that they deserve. We cannot ignore the plight of our workers. They are the ones carrying this economy, and we must protect them at all costs. We must not tolerate inequality, injustice, and poverty. And this is why we urgently must pass this measure. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. President. Thank you to the Committee on Labor, and I hope that this is a measure that the Senate as an institution must prioritize and pass before the Holy Week break. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, Senate President Pro Temp Lauren Legarda. Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure is the gentleman from Davao and Batangas, no other than Senator Christopher Bongo. I move that he be recognized.
Our distinguished colleague from Davao City and Batangas Province, Senator Christopher Bongo is recognized.
Mr. President, as one of the co-authors of this measure, I rise today to co-sponsor and express my full support for to the measure providing 100 pesos daily minimum wage increase for employees and workers in the private sector, Mr. President, kabalikat ng ating tungkulin na magserbisyo sa publiko ay isang isulong ang mandato ng saligang batas na maglaan ng maayos na trabaho, patas na benepisyo at pasweldo at pantay na oportunidad para sa lahat ng Pilipino. Sa nagdaang taon, marami sa mga kababayan natin ang nawalan ng trabaho dahil sa pandemya. Marami sa mga business sectors natin ang nahinto at nagsara, kaya't marami sa kanila ang nawalan ng hanap buhay. Dagdag pa rito ang patuloy na pagtaas ng presyo ng mga bilihin sa merkado na nagbibigay pasakit sa bulsa ng mga mahirap nating kababayan. In fact, Mr. President, a survey conducted by the SWS from September to October of last year revealed that around 13.2 million families considered themselves as poor. This is higher than the 12.5 million estimated in June 2023. Totoo po na dahan-dahan nang bumubukas ang ating ekonomiya at marami na rin po ang nakakabalik sa kanilang mga trabaho at hanap buhay. Ngunit hirap pa rin ang mga ordinaryong Pilipinong itawid ang araw-araw na gastusin dahil sa inflation at mababang sweldo. Mr. President, unahin natin ang kapakanan ng mga mahirap. Dapat walang magutom, dapat maramdaman nila ang pagbangon ng ekonomiya tungo sa mas ligtas at komportableng buhay pagkatapos po ng pandemya. The measure at hand serves as our response to the mandate of the Constitution to alleviate the living conditions of the ordinary Filipinos through policies that provide for a decent and humane standard of living and improved quality of life, particularly of the working class, by ensuring the right of labor to its just share in the fruits of production, to guarantee the workers' right to a living wage, and to promote social justice. Moreover, it is also the policy of social justice to strike a balance between the interests of the employers and workers. This bill is not meant to add burden to our employers, but to strike a balance as what social justice means. Dapat po ay may pantay ding pagkilala sa karapatan at kapakanan ng lahat ng sektor sa lakas sa paggawa. Sa mga mayayaman, kung hindi naman po kayo malulugi, ipamahagi niyo naman po ang inyong kita sa mga mahirap nating kababayan, sa mga isang kahig, isang tuka. Mr. President, ako po ay patuloy na susuporta at titindig para sa kapakanan ng bawat manggagawang Pilipino. Our march towards full and inclusive economic recovery must be felt by everyone, especially our ordinary Filipino workers. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Senator Christopher Bongo.
Mr. President, Senators Revilla and Nancy Binay would just like to insert into the records their co-sponsorship speech. Next to co-sponsor, Mr. President, is the distinguished gentleman from Davao and the province of Bohol, no other than our idol, Senator Ronald Bato Dela Rosa. I move that he be recognized.
Our brother from Mindanao, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, and from Bohol is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, Mr. President, and distinguished colleagues. I rise today before this august chamber to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2534 under Committee Report number 190, entitled Wage Increase Act of 2023, which aims to increase the minimum wage rate of all workers in the private sector, whether agricultural or non-agricultural, by 100 pesos a day. It gives me great honor and pride to take part in furthering this noble cause of directly aiding our countrymen's life through a legislated wage increase. This undertaking will somehow ease the financial burden of several of our people who continue to make ends meet. Hopefully, may this measure also give even a little amount of comfort to some. We very well know that even before the pandemic, workers in the private sector have struggled in their everyday lives to put food on their plate. Inflation is a reality that needs to be addressed by the government with urgency. I am very fortunate to belong to an institution that has always been sensitive to the plight of the ordinary Filipino. The Senate, through this legislation, has committed itself to not only decrease the suffering of our people, but also end it. Magkano po ba ang dignidad ng isang Pilipinong manggagawa? Ito po ay kailanman hindi masusukat ng anumang halaga ng salapi. Buong-buo po ang aking pagsuporta sa dagdag na 100 piso sa sahod ng ating mga manggagawa. Ngunit wala rin naman po sigurong masama kung gusto pa natin itong dagdagan pa. Bagamat maituturing po na pampaampat ng pagdurugo o pananandaliang lunas ang ating panukala na ito, nawa po ay kahit papaano ay makapagbigay ito ng kahit kaunting kaluwagan at espasyo para makahinga ang ating mga kababayan. To reiterate, there is no monetary amount that can ever measure the dignity of the Filipino worker. However, Mr. President, I hope the workers will consider this legislative measure as a first tranche of efforts that the Senate will do to requite the unmeasurable contribution of minimum wage workers to our economy. Malayo-layo pa po ang ating lalakbayin bilang isang bansa para makamit ang ating minimithing pag-unlad at ganap na pagwawagi laban sa kahirapan. Pero ituring po natin ang panukalang ito na isa sa marami pa nating mga hakbang patungo sa pagbibigay ng kaginhawaan sa buhay ng ating mga manggagawa. Ika nga po ng mga kabataan ngayon, malayo pa, pero malayo na. Pasasaan pa't makakarating din. Thank you, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Bato de la Rosa.
Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure is the distinguished gentleman from Camarines Norte and Nueva Ecija, no other than our idol, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our dear brother, adopted son of Mindanao and from Nueva Ecija and Camarines Norte, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo at sa ating pinunong mayorya. Bismillah, gusto ko lamang pong magbigay ng isang matipunong saludo sa amin pong mga kasamang senador na nagbigay po ng panukalang ito. Unang-una na po, siyempre, kay Senator Jingo Estrada at sa ating pong Warrior Senate President, Senator Mig Subiri, at sa lahat po ng mga author ng panukala na ito. Nais ko lamang din pong ipahatid ang aking intensyon na maging kapwa may akda at kapwa sponsor ng Senate Bill number 2534 sa ilalim ng Committee Report number 190. Ang paghahain po ng panukalang ito sa plenaryo ay patotoo na mayroong mga tengang nakikinig at pusong nakakaunawa sa pinagdadaanan ng mga mamamayang Pilipino. At bilang gusto ko lamang pong isunod, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, na sana po ay maharap din po natin ang usapin ng patungkol sa union, na ito po ay nagiging suliranin na rin ng ating mga manggagawa sapagkat nagkakaroon po tayo ng mga homegrown unions na ito po ay nagiging sagabal, nagiging problema, suliranin ng ating mga manggagawa sapagkat ang sinasabi po sa ating konstitusyon dapat sila, mga manggagawa, ang nagtatayo ng union, hindi yung mismong kanilang panagtatrabahuan. Yun lamang po, maraming salamat po, mabuhay po kayo at muli po akong sumasaludo. Isa pong karangalan sa inyong lingkod na maging bahagi ng panukalang batas na ito. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat din, Ginoong Senator Robin Hood Padilla.
Mr. President, Senator Bato de la Rosa is seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Just quickly, this representation is requesting to be made as a co-author of this particular measure with the permission of the main author, Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank-
Well, I'm the
all means.
principal author din ako, and together with the sponsor. I would suggest that we make all members. I think no members against this measure. Mr.
I would love to make that motion, Mr.
Yeah.
President, if you want me to, but it's
Yes.
up to you, Mr. President.
Why not? It's up
I
to
think
them.
a lot of our colleagues have signified their
Intention to
intention,
support.
Mr.
Oo.
President, and at the proper time, probably, Mr. President.
Probably at the
we'll,
proper time, after the debates.
Yes, Mr. President, because in the Senate, we
Respect.
debate
Yeah,
and
we
talk
respect.
and
We
debate.
respect every individual opinion and
Yes.
position. Yes.
No fast break po yung binibigay, sinasabi ni Senator Bato. Mr. President, next to co-sponsor the measure is the distinguished lady from Akbayan, our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Hontiveros. I move that she be recognized, Mr. President.
Another one of our fighters and advocates of wage increase in the Senate, no other than our distinguished Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Senator Risa Hontiveros is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Mr. President, I wish to co-sponsor this bill as support to increase the minimum wage as a starting point, leading to a living wage. Naniniwala po ako na mismong ganitong uri ng mga panukalang batas ang dapat tutukan ng lehislatura, parehong Senado at House of Representatives. After all, this is precisely the mandate of our 1987 Constitution. Article 13, Section 1 declares that the Congress shall give a highest priority to the enactment of measures that protect and enhance the right of all the people to human dignity, reduce social, economic, and political inequalities, and remove cultural inequities by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. Pagpapabuti sa kapakanan ng karaniwang Pilipino ang tanging rason kung bakit tayo narito. Kasabay po nito, dapat rin nating ikonsidera ang mas malawak pang suporta ng gobyerno sa MSMEs. Ito ang mga dapat nating inaaral at tinatrabaho, hindi ang pekeng PI at questionableng tsa-tsa. Salamat kaayo, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator
Thank you,
Risa
Mr. President.
Hontiveros.
Last but not the least, to co-sponsor the measure is the distinguished lady from Taguig and Pateros, no other than our resident athlete, Mr. President, Senator Pia Cayetano. I move that she be recognized, Mr.
Our
President.
distinguished colleague, Senator Pia Cayetano, the representative of Taguig, Pateros, and the Republic of the Philippines is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, just a very short co-sponsorship speech. Mr. President, as the Senate Committee Chair of the Committee on Sustainable Development, Goals, Innovation, Futures Thinking, we talk about sustainable development. We broadcast to the world, we show pictures of our beautiful landscape, seascape, and of course, the picture of modernization. But as they say, Mr. President, you can only determine truly how advanced or how developed a country is when you look at how they treat the most vulnerable in their society. So when we look at families who cannot even feed their children 3 meals a day, who struggle to put literally a roof over the head, where they live in shanties, they live, Mr. President, in these worn tarps that are used during political campaigns, di ba? After the campaign, you'll see na bubong na yan ng mga bahay, pader na yan ng kanilang barong-barong. This is how millions of people live in the Philippines, Mr. President. So when we take time dealing with political issues, it takes time away from dealing with the poorest of the poor who need our support to live a decent life. Mr. President, in our show, Cayetano in Action with Boy Abunda, we often tackle problems that include marital problems, nagbubugbugan na asawa, utang, minsan utang ng nanay sa anak na hindi na nag-usap ang nanay at anak for 3 years dahil sa utang, couples who separate dahil sa whatever conflict they have. 99%, Mr. President, the root of their problem is poverty. Sheer poverty. May daycare teacher na sinumbong ang isang nanay dahil hindi na pinapasok sa daycare ang kanyang anak. And the reason is, sobra siyang nahihiya dahil wala siyang pagkain na mabigay sa anak niya, papasok daw yung anak niya ng gutom. So sa kahihiyan, hindi niya lang niya pinapapasok yung anak niya, Mr. President. So all of these legal issues can be attributed to people having decent jobs and decent wages. And so I joined the Senate President and our colleagues in co-sponsoring this very important measure. It may not seem like a lot because it is really not that much, but I believe it paves the way in us recognizing that this cannot continue as it is. When His Honor, the Senate President, mentioned BARM, we do need to look into this and see how we can single out those areas that need more support, because it is just really how it is. I mean, when I traveled and His Honor, the Senate President, and I are walking mates during our official trips, I've talked to our embassies and our host countries about their poverties in their countries. Their poverties, at least the countries I've visited, are different from our poverties. May bahay pa rin silang nauuwian. Pag malamig, baka pinag-aawayan nila ng konti, yung heater hindi ganun kainit. Pero may trabaho naman. Yung trabaho siguro nila, kung 600 euro a month na maliit sa Europe, pero 600 times 60, that's 36,000 pesos. And here we're talking about hindi pa umaabot sa 15,000 pesos, Mr. President. So it's incomparable, but it is not acceptable that we continue this way. So I thank His Honor for prioritizing this measure. And as I said, I join our colleagues in supporting this measure. I will submit a more comprehensive sponsorship speech for the record, because I just really like to tie it into all the SDGs that are affected by this. Health, education. Hindi mo nga mapaaral yung anak mo dahil wala kang pambaon man lang para may makain siya. And you can't even begin to go to get health care dahil karamihan sa kanila, alam nila na kahit papano may aambag dahil yung sinasabing no balance billing, hindi naman actually 100% accurate. Meron din naman iaabono, depende rin sa sakit. So, tama sila na di bali na lang, wala na lang silang aasahan, and that is not how we want our Filipino people to feel. So again, my full support for this measure, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear colleague, my constant walking companion.
Thank you, Mr. President. And it's true, Mr. President, that it's about time that we need to act on this very important piece of legislation. So again, we thank you, Mr. President, our leader, Senator Zubiri, and our chairperson, Senator Jinggoy Estrada of the Senate Committee on Labor. Mr. President, to allow our colleagues to further study the measure, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2534 under Committee Report number 190. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2386 under Committee Report number 99. This bill pertains to the Real Property Valuation and Assessment Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, there being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellations and debate. And so with that, I move that we resume the period of interpellations and recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and to interpellate our Deputy Majority Leader, Senator Mark Villar. So move, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague, the chairperson of the Committee on Ways and Means, Senator, the very hardworking Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and to interpolate the equally hardworking Deputy Majority Floor Leader, Senator Mark Villar.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the good sponsor, may I be allowed to proceed with my interpellation?
Yes, more than willingly, Mr. President.
Yes, I just have a few questions relating to my work as a former DPWH secretary and under the Build Then, which is now continuing under the Build Better More program of this administration. My question is, in Section 2 of the committee report, in item B, provides in the declaration policy that the bill is for the adoption of market value as the single real property valuation base for the assessment of real property-related taxes in the country and for the valuation of real property for various transactions by all government agencies. Is this correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, it's correct, Mr. President.
Yes. And in proposing as part of the policy direction of the bill, it was provided in Section 36, letter C, sub-item 3, that the provisions of Section 567 of the Republic Act number 10752 are amended insofar as they are consistent with the provisions of this bill. Is this correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, that's correct.
Thank you. As former Secretary of the DPWH, of course, I was tasked with the heavy responsibility of settling various right-of-way issues, acquisition problems that are governed by the Republic Act 10752, which while instrumental in facilitating the completion of several big-ticket projects, there are still numerous concerns that remain to be resolved in right-of-way issues, such as funding requirements and the reasonableness of the just compensation to be paid to the owners whose real properties are affected by the government project. In fact, the amendment of RA 10752 was actually proposed as a priority legislation for this Congress in the previous LEDAC meeting. So I may ask the good sponsor, what will now be the valuation that the national government will offer to negotiate for the right-of-way acquisition of the lands after the repeal of Section 5 of RA 10752?
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, what the bill envisions is to have a uniform valuation for all the different agencies. And based on our research, there are about 23 different agencies that conducts valuations using different methods. But for right-of-way acquisition, generally, Mr. President, they use the zonal valuation as well as the fair market value of that locality. So in this particular case, Mr. President, since we're harmonizing and uniforming the valuation, the bill will now have a single valuation for all the different agencies. So in short, the expropriation will use this valuation, Mr.
Yes,
President.
so thank you, Mr. President. So the valuation for the negotiated sale will now be based on the fair market value as stated in the subject bill as approved by the
Yes, Mr. President, correct.
Secretary of Finance, yes. Thank you, Mr. President. And we see that since the valuation is expected to increase, the government may be able to avoid the lengthy litigation to secure writ of
Yes.
possession before the court of law. My next question.
Correct, Mr. President.
Yes. My next question, Mr. President and good sponsor, in the case that the landowner refuses to negotiate, what will be the valuation that the government needs to deposit during the expropriation case to secure a writ of possession, since the bill will partially amend Section 6 of RA 10752?
Correct. Well, Mr. President, the government typically uses, for national government, the expropriation proceedings vary from local governments and national government. In the national government, they usually use the zonal valuation, but the zonal valuation now will be based on this fair market value that will be formulated by the local government unit. So in this particular case, the deposit will be based on the valuation generated by the SMVs, Mr. President, the Schedule of Market Values.
Thank you, Mr. President. There may be a need to further study the budgetary impact of the partial repeal of Section 6 of RA 10752, considering that the depositary requirement for expropriation in acquiring lands affected by government projects may result to an increase in the budgetary requirements of various national government agencies. This will change the deposit requirement for expropriation cases from 100% of BI or zonal value to 100% of fair market value. As the valuation will increase, then Congress must be reminded that during the committee deliberation of the budget of the DPWH, we were informed regarding the inadequacy of funds being given to facilitate the right-of-way requirements of government. The Congress must be ready to provide additional appropriation should the enactment of the RP VARA result in the increase of the just compensation that the government needs to settle. For the body's information, the proposed budget of the DPWH for the right-of-way payment was 1.71 billion. If the RP VARA will result to the increase in the compensation of the project-affected persons, the government must again review the timeline for the completion of the much-needed infrastructure as approved by the administration, as it may result in difficulty in acquiring the right-of-way for the project. May I ask the good sponsor, Mr. President, if the DPWH and the DOTR were able to comment on this concern?
Yes, Mr. President, the DPWH were present or was present during the hearing, Mr. President. But just to comment on the first, on the statement of the good gentleman from Las Piñas. Typically in a expropriation proceedings, the deposit is based on the zonal valuation. I'm sure the good gentleman will know, being the former secretary of the PWH, or the zonal valuation or the fair market value. And typically, if the landowner will not agree yet on any, whether zonal or fair market value, litigation will ensue. And that process of litigation can take many, many years to solve. And that litigation will also create delays in the project, Mr. President. And if you unpack the reasoning, it's really because of the price that the landowner is demanding. No? And typically the price is what he thinks is fair to him. No? So this addresses that potential delay by coming up with a fair market value that is based on the actual economic situation of that area. So in other words, it will not be arbitrary. It will be based on the latest transaction in that area, and that transaction will be based on, will be used to determine the schedule of market value. And when the schedule of market value is determined, then that is now what government will be using to purchase your land or to make a deposit. So this bill aims to eliminate the delays, no? Because the delays is also very costly for government, especially in big ticket projects.
Yes. Yeah. So I just hope that this addresses, this concern is addressed, because it does have an impact. For instance, if in general the appraised value is higher than the zonal value, so if this is higher and the budget is insufficient to make a payment so that we can get the writ of possession, it might have an effect on the implementation of our government project. So I think that's just something that concerns me, coming from the sector of infrastructure implementation. At the same time, also, if we were to get a appraisal, we would have to get it from a GFI. And from my experience, the GFIs are already very busy with other. It takes time to get that appraisal from the GFI. Usually, depending on the needs, and usually there's a lot of cases in any single project. So, based on that, I hope we can come up with. I will recommend some amendments that might rectify or maybe resolve the situation, so that the effect on our infrastructure projects, if any, will be minimal, Mr. President.
Yeah. And definitely we would welcome amendments from the good gentleman from Las Piñas, being an expert in infrastructure as well as expropriation proceedings. But just to go back on the difference between the zonal and the appraised value, since the SMVs, or the schedule of market values, will be based on what we call the Philippine Valuation Standard, which is being used by appraisers.
Yes.
The zonal valuation, the schedule of market value, and the appraised value will be the same, no? Because all of them are using the same standards as promulgated in the Philippine Valuation Standard. So, in theory, there should be no difference between the schedule of market value, the zonal valuation, and the appraised value. So everything will be the same in terms of valuing the property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. And may we also request for copies of the position papers of the various agencies, so that we can also study their comments regarding this legislation.
Yeah. We'll furnish the good gentleman the position papers.
That would be all, Mr. President. I end my interpellation. I would like to thank the good sponsor for his time and patience. To reiterate, I would like to discuss some proposed amendments to further improve the bill and fine-tune the bill at the appropriate time. Thank you very much,
We
Mr.
would
President.
welcome any refinements and improvements to the bill, especially coming from a former DPWH secretary who's very experienced in launching big ticket and very important national infrastructure projects. Thank you very much.
I thank the two gentlemen. It was a joy to listen to you both. I learned a lot on your deliberations. So thank you to former Secretary, now Senator Mark Villar, and to, of course, our dear sponsor for the prompt answers to his questions. Session suspended for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or ask any questions on the bill at hand. And so I move to close the period of interpellations and debate. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, to allow our secretariat also to finalize the clean copy for the period of amendments. I move that we suspend. Kaya nga. I am suspending
suspending
because there's no
consideration of the
amendments
measure.
right now. It's not ready yet.
Yes.
And that's
So
why I'm
suspend.
moving that we suspend the consideration of Senate Bill number 2386, Mr.
Sa
President.
inyo, kawawa naman, Majority Leader natin. Yes, there being no objection to the motion, Majority Leader,
Thank you, Mr. President.
motion is approved.
Mr. President, may I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended.
Mr. President, at this juncture, may we recognize the distinguished gentleman from Camarines Norte and Nueva Ecija, our colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, for his manifestation, Mr. President.
Yes, and also the adopted son of Mindanao, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. I know you have good news for us today, for the record. You're recognized, sir.
Maraming salamat po, aming mandirigmang ginoong tagapangulo at sa atin pong pinunong mayorya. A'udhu billahi minasyaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bismillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Sa lahat po ng bumubuo ng lupon ng pagpupulong na ito, nais ko pong ibalita ang tagumpay ng demokrasya sa ating inang bayang Pilipinas na sumibol sa bulwagang ito. Kung inyo pong mamarapatin, babalikan ko po sana ang nakalipas na 6 na buwan. Noong pong Augusto 10, 2023, habang papunta sa Kuala Lumpur, ay hinarang po si Tatay Muhammad Said ng mga tauhan ng Bureau of Immigration sa Naya, Terminal 3. Matapos pong magkaroon ng alert ang kanyang pangalan dahil sa isang Interpol Red Notice at ipinasa sa NBI International Airport Investigation Division. Agosto 29, sa ulat ng NBI, ang hinahanap ng kinauukulan na si Muhammad Said alias Ama Maas ay wanted dahil sa kanyang partisipasyon o pamumuno sa 25 counts of frustrated murder, 3 separate murder cases, kidnapping with murder, at kidnap with serious illegal detention. September 5, tumayo po tayong lahat sa bulwagang ito at humingi po ng saklolo, kagyat pong umaksyon ang Warrior Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri, kaakibat po ang bar top-notcher Minority Leader Aquilino Pimentel para harapin ang kasong mistaken identity ni Tatay Muhammad Makaantal Said. Sa edad po na 62 years old, isa pong senior. Umalingaw-ngaw ang boses ng mga senador upang ipaglaban ang karapatan ni Muhammad Makaantal Said. Dumaan po ang ilang buwan at bagong taon na natiling nakapiit po si Tatay Said para sa mga akusasyong wala siyang kinalaman. Sa mga buwang ito, sa patnubay pa rin po ng lupon ng Senado at sa kapangyarihan po ng umaapaw na pirma ng 24 na senador, hindi po tumigil ang ating tanggapan sa pagsubaybay sa pag-usad ng kasong naihain laban kay Tatay Said. Mula po sa Taguig hanggang Zamboanga Peninsula, Sulu at Tawi-Tawi. Hindi rin po tumigil ang Public Attorney's Office sa pangunguna nila District Public Attorney Ariel Ruiz, Attorney Claudette Claudel, Attorney Bridget Servino, Attorney Maria Perpetua Ramos, Regional Public Attorney Edgardo Gonzales, Attorney Anesito Tiempo, Attorney Muhammad Ahmad Amsawa, at sa pamumuno ni PAO Chief Attorney Persida Acosta upang sigurihing malinis si Tatay Said at ang kanyang pangalan ay maalis po dito sa mga karumal-dumal na krimen. Matapos po ang mahabang paghihintay at paglilitis, si Tatay Said po ay nakalaya na. Ginoong Pangulo, dahil po sa ipinakitang pagmamahal ng Senado at ipinaglaban ng Senado na makalaya si Tatay. Ngayon po, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, nandito po ngayon si Tatay, nakalabas na po siya. Maraming salamat po. Alam niyo po, ito po ay isang tagumpay sapagkat dito ay pinakikita, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, ang boses ng Senado. Na kapag nag-ingay at ipinaglaban ng Senado, talaga pong merong talagang demokrasyang mararamdaman ang ating mga kababayan. Ngayon po, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, hindi po natapos ang kwento sapagkat patuloy po ang pagiging biktima ng pangalang Ama Maas. Sapagkat pagkatapos po nating mapagtagumpayan ngayon si tatay, meron naman pong isang kapangalan pa uli. Meron na naman pong isang individual na humihingi ng tulong sa atin sapagkat ang isang nangangalang Muhammad Pangkoga Said, siya po ang lumabas na litrato dito. Siya po yan. Ito po yung nilabas ng litrato ng ating mga naghahanap ng kidnapper. Ito po yung lumabas. Ito pong taong ito ay humihingi din ng tulong sa atin na hindi ako yan. Sapagkat pinatutunayan po ng Armed Forces of the Philippines, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, na patay na po. Patay na po yung pinaghahanap ng batas. Siya po ay matagal nang nakaratay. Kaya sana po ay Ginoong Tagapangulo, ang kaso po ng mistaken identity ay hindi biro-biro. Ito po ay hindi makatwiran, makatarungan at makatao. Hindi na po ito katanggap-tanggap, lalo na sa panahon na bumubuhos ang technology at innovations. Kung nais po nating tunay na maibalik ang tiwala ng publiko at patatagin ang pundasyon ng isang makatarungang lipunan, sana po ay wala nang matulad kay Tatay Muhammad at kay Muhammad Pangkoga Said. Lagi po sanang tandaan ng mga ahensya ng gobyerno ang sinabi sa Konstitusyon, Artikulo 3, Seksyon 1, hindi dapat alisan ng buhay, kalayaan o ari-arian ang sinumang tao ng hindi kaparaanan ng batas. Di pagkaitan ng sinumang tao, kailangan ibigay ang pangangalaga ng batas pantay-pantay sa bawat Pilipino. Muli po, Ginoong Pangulo, ako po'y nagpapasalamat sa lupon ng mga Senado, sa lupon ng mga senador, ang inyo pong 24 na pirma ay siyang tunay na pirma ng demokrasya ng pelikulang Pilipino, ng Republika ng Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po kayo, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, dahil sa inyong pagtutok nitong kasong ito at pagkuha ng suporta ng lahat ng membro ng Senado. So, Majority Leader,
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I just make a very short manifestation? First of all, we laud the efforts of our dear colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. I distinctly remember that very time when he talked to me about it, and I was the first one to volunteer to distribute to ask for the signatures of our colleagues here in this August chamber in this particular incident, Mr. President. But Mr. President, more than anything, despite the fact that we are happy that Mr. Muhammad Said is here with us, we would like to apologize to him, Mr. President, on behalf ng mga kawaninang pamahalaan sa gobyerno. Humihingi po kami ng paumanhin. Tatay, sir, paumanhin po sa pagkukulang ng ating pamahalaan, ng ating gobyerno. Nakakalungkot po, Mr. President, and this is the reason why I would request the gentleman from Nueva Ecija and Camarines Norte to instead of just making it as a manifestation, we convert his manifestation into a privileged speech so that we can refer it, perhaps, Mr. President, in the Rules Committee, and I would take the lead if with your blessing, Mr. President. I spoke with our minority leader to look into this so that, Mr. President, we can come up with a report and ask the concerned government agencies, PNP, DOJ, BID, kung sino man, Mr. President. Hindi po biro ito. Hindi po dapat ito sabihing isolated case, Mr. President, kasi pagkasabi pa nga po nung ating kasamahan na nandito, nakalaya na po si Muhammad Said, meron na namang another Muhammad Said na pinapangalanan at tinuturo, samantalang ang AFP pala sinasabing matagal ng malamig na bangkay itong tao na ito. Mr. President, hindi po biro ito, and we feel that saying sorry is not enough, Mr. President. Dapat may compensation, dapat humingi ng public apology kung sino man yung mga lousy na nagpalabas ng ganitong kautusan, Mr. President, without having a strong basis to arrest and detain our visitor today, Mr. President. I also would like to point out, Mr. President, that this representation filed Senate Bill number 1607, amending RA number 7309, which created the Board of Claims under the Department of Justice. Our Senate Minority Leader is also our co-author, Mr. President, kasi yung current law provides that victims are only entitled to a mere 1,000 pesos per month of unjust detention or imprisonment, or a maximum of 10,000 pesos for all other cases, Mr. President. Hindi ho makatarungan ito kung pag-uusapan natin ang hustisya, nakakahiya po para sa isang kawani ng pamahalaan o isang government official, employee, na magsabing ito ay okay lang at parte ito ng justice system natin. Mr. President, we feel that, and as we push this measure, we wanted to increase the amount of compensation from 1,000 to 5,000 per month, subject to a maximum of 300,000 for victims of illegal detention and 50,000 for victims of other crimes. We hope to see an improvement, Mr. President. That's all I can say right now. We are dying to see a big improvement, Mr. President, in our justice system, not only through this bill, but also to this incident right now that had happened right before our very eyes, Mr. President. As I met Mr. Muhammad Said kanina, Mr. President, damang-dama ko, Mr. President, yung pinagdaanan po niya. Tao lang ho tayo eh. Masakit po yung ginawa sa kanya, Mr. President. Nakakahiya po na parte tayo ng gobyerno, tas ganun lang po yung mangyayari, tapos hihingi lang ng sorry yung government agency. So again, Mr. President, with the indulgence of my colleagues, if I can refer this privileged speech of our dear colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, to the Committee on Rules, Mr. President.
Yes, and I join your
Thank you.
motion dahil unang-una, alam mo, tama sinabi ni Senator Joel, yan ang pinag-usapan natin dyan na Manong kanina. Sabi ko, ganyan na lang ba? Na ilalabas ka lang na wala pa nga yatang hindi pa humingi ng paumanhin ng mga agencies. Hindi pa sila nabibigay ng formal apology. Tayo pa lang sa Senado, in behalf of the government of the Philippines. Pero alam mo, hindi dapat ganyan lang. Dapat they should do their casework more efficiently. Tama sinabi ni Senator Padilla kanina na modernize na lahat, di ba? Meron ng DNA, meron ng yung mga thumb marks, mga digital na lahat nitong mga larawan nila. Hindi na dapat mangyari muli ito sa ating mga kababayan. At tama po si Senator Robin, baka iisa lamang siya sa napakarami, no? Napakaraming may mga problemang ganito na mistaken identity. Kaya importante dyan ay tulungan natin si Manong. I agree na we come up with a formal notice sa mga ahensya like NBI, sa Bureau of Immigrations, pati yung Department of Justice, and so that they can give a formal apology and hopefully just compensation. Yung illegal detention na nangyari dun sa kanya, arbitrary detention is something that siguro is an injustice, no? Injustice talaga yan. Walang hustisya, ika nga, no, sa pangyayaring yon. So, sa ating mga kapatid na Muslim, I'm so happy, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, God is great truly, na may hustisya po. And you have the support of the Senate. Pagka ganun, ang tutulungan talaga namin dito sa Senado, kapakanan natin mga kababayan, no matter how difficult it is. Basta tumakbo lang po kayo dito sa Senado, tutulungan po kayo. At lahat po kami, lahat po kami hinalal ninyo. Hindi po kami halal na isang distrito. Kami po halal na mga taga Barm, taga Ilocos Norte, taga Visayas, taga Cebu. Kaya lahat po ng hinanakit at hinanaing ng ating mga kababayan sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas, dito po ang puntahan sa Senado dahil yan po ang trabaho namin, na tulungan kayo. So, without further ado, Majority Leader, you can refer the
Yes, Mr. President, I
speech
move
of
that
the
we
gentleman.
refer the speech of the gentleman from Nueva Ecija and Camarines Norte, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, and all the manifestations thereon to the Committee on Rules. I so move, Mr.
And
President.
before I do that, I just also want to thank once again Senator Robin Hood Padilla.
Yes.
Kung hindi dahil sa iyo, Padre, hindi mo tinutukan ito, siguro baka naiwan ng nasa kulungan si Muhammad Said. So, we have to give respect where respect is due. Mabuhay ka, sir, and continue to fight for the needs of our kababayan, particularly our Muslim brothers in Mindanao. Maraming salamat sa iyo. Mabuhay ka. Thank you. So
Move for the
there being-
previous motion, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, February 12, 2024. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, February 12, 2024. Have a good and safe weekend.